So we're here with Agnes Sam at our home in York, and today we're going to talk about Jesus is Indian. This is the collection of South African short stories that was first published by the Women's Press in 1989, before being included in the African Writers series by Heinemann, now in its third edition published by Paloma Books. Can you begin by telling us how you came to write this collection of short stories?
I think the stimulus for this, or the inspiration, was the discovery of the document that I spoke about quite a long time ago, which gave information about indentured labour, which we knew nothing about, basically, many of us. And when I realised that we knew so little about indentured labour, I created this series of short stories. And what was, it was originally supposed to be in chronological order, beginning with the storyteller and they christened it in indenture. But then I think the publisher put the initial stories at the back and altered the chronology. That's basically. But the inspiration was the document I found belonging to a member of my family.
Can you tell us a bit more about that document?
The document simply gave the name of one of my ancestors, and it was a release document, releasing him from indenture. There was some significant information on it. Partly there was he was given a number and the name of the ship was there and the name of the person, I think, that he would be in bondage to, for the term that he was indentured.
So basically, indentured labour is a form of slavery in those days.
That's right, and that's why the themes in the book are about religion. There's definitely, you can see that the religious theme and its conflict between women, conflict within the family, about these religious themes that came to the fore during apartheid.
The title itself is quite controversial, and I think when the book was first published by the Women's Press, I understand you were interviewed by some Catholic newspapers, quite interested to know the background to the actual title. Maybe you can talk to us about the title story itself.
The title and the story, of course, are distinct. The title, if people read, they will see that it doesn't say Jesus was an Indian, because we all know Jesus was a Jew, and the early Christians were Jewish. It's in the present tense. So in the one sense, it's affirming that Jesus is, according to Christians, that Jesus lives. So it's an affirmation of that, and it's saying Jesus is Indian, and you need to read the story to understand where that comes from. But people have read it simply as saying Jesus is Indian when they think Jesus was a Jew, you know. And you would say that in the past Jesus was a Jew, but when you look at the story itself, it's an affirmation of Jesus being alive and of somebody saying that Jesus is Indian. The story itself is about a child in a classroom being taught by nuns, being taught English, and she's resisting the domination almost by the teacher wanting her to call her mother, mother. And she accepts everything else about the language, but she's refusing to alter her stance on this one thing, that she will call her mother what she wants to call her mother and not revert to English. So that's basically what the story is about. But it's also the conflict about language, you know. and the fact that the mother is not aware of what is happening to the child when she goes to school. That's really what the story's about.
So that particular story, and I think there's one called The Storyteller, and a few others, have proved quite popular in terms of their inclusion in a number of anthologies over the years since the original publication. Why do you think certain stories have appealed more to readers and other editors at other publishing houses than maybe some of the other stories?
I think basically that, you know, most people read a book from cover to cover and that's it. But it needs a second reading, and it's for people to realize the religious theme that runs throughout the whole collection. And when you look at them, you know, the first story, if I can remember correctly, that was Jesus is Indian. And then you get the story called High Heels, and let me just see if I can think of, I think it's High Heels.
It's Jelly Mouse, isn't there? Is one of them.
Pardon?
Jelly Mouse, I think, is one of them.
No, that's near the end when they've actually left, you know, the country. It's I need to just refresh my mind. It's High Heels, A Bag of Sweets, and The Well-Loved Woman. Now those three are connected to each other, you know, because High Heels shows a conflict. There are two religions, the Hinduism and the Christianity, and it's almost as if they're uncertain of which is the true faith. So you have that conflict within the family, and then with the Well-Loved Woman, she conforms to what the society wants of her, what the family wants. She abandons the person she believes she loves and marries somebody else to conform to the religious idea. And then the third story, A Bag of Sweets. There are two religions, and the person in the story abandons her faith in order to marry someone else. So that is the religious theme there. Conflict within the family with having two religions. And then you have the, what people don't realize as well, is that the inspiration for some of the stories comes from European art. Sunflowers is Van Gogh, The Child in Dove is Picasso, and I think one of the expressionists did The Field of Poppies. So those three were inspiration for those three short stories. And you find that they deal with imprisonment. You know, the sunflowers, somebody's imprisoned. The Child and Dove is about a schoolgirl who's on the run and she ends up in prison when they're marching after Soweto. And then the Field of Poppies obviously has the connection with poppies and things like that. So there's that conflict, that thing about imprisonment running through those three stories. But the connection is, the inspiration was the sunflowers, and that's sort of the colours for the African National Congress as well. So that was that theme. And then you get two women, you get Nana and Devi, and then you get Innocence. And there are women here who are in conflict with each other because of apartheid. You know, Nana and Devi in conflict over having loved the same person. And then two women chained together and in conflict because one is African and the other one is a white woman. And then the one they call Innocence is actually a retelling of the Nativity in terms of apartheid. But one has to read it closely to realize that that is what these stories are about. And they are to do with apartheid, they are to do with religion. You get The Seed, where the child is taken from home and brought to Europe, you know. And the child cannot understand the difference between having been in Africa with soil and the smells and the things the child is accustomed to, and coming to Europe and having to adapt to what is a completely different country. Then Maths and Jelly Mouse includes that theme, because in Jelly Mouse the children are very young and the mother's trying to maintain their innocence and the world of fantasy, because once they reach 7 they will lose that distinction. There will be a distinction, but until they're 7 they don't have that. And in Maths they're older and they're coping with prejudice and things like that in Europe. And finally there is the introduction itself. The first introduction was written in exile, and the third edition was written after I had gone home, had looked at things, researched a lot, and discovered information that I would never have had from being in exile.
There's been quite a lot of academic interest in some of the stories. I understand you've been working on a reader's notes type sort of questions for people.
Yes.
Tell us a bit about that.
Because partly when I look at what has been done, some of the books are, some of the stories are in school. Then I look at it and I think it's very skimpy. It isn't something that will help somebody to understand exactly what this is about. It isn't, I mean, much of it has to do with language, because I do love the English language, and part of what I'm writing is to have somebody enjoy the experience of how the words are used, the descriptions, but also what is connecting all these short stories together.
Okay, Agnes, thank you very much.
Thank you, bye-bye.